I'm Tom Conkle. I'm a cybersecurity engineer with Optic Cyber Solutions. I want to take a few moments today to talk to you about the risk management framework, which is a security lifecycle development approach, and how that aligns to a common software system development lifecycle. This video is going to build on several of the other videos that we have already recorded, including the RMF overview, the SSP or system security plan overview of how to develop a system security plan, as well as the RMF acronym video that explains all the acronyms used throughout the RMF. As we get started, let's just talk about system or software development life cycles in general. As you can see here on this slide, a common SDLC is depicted. Your SDLC may follow the same steps, may have additional steps within it, but most SDLCs, while they do vary, have very similar steps that we see here that start with the requirement analysis, going into design, implementation, test, and evolution of the software that's being developed itself. And then, of course, you may have different approaches, or many organizations have different approaches for actually implementing the SDLC, right? They may, a common method may be the waterfall approach, where we go through each step methodically, make sure that we're in place, or we may have more of an agile methodology that we follow so that we develop and deploy software more quickly, but still leveraging an SDLC. So now that we know the common steps that we see within an SDLC, and we know from the previous video on the overview of the RMF steps that start with prepare, going to categorize, select, implement, assess, authorize, and monitor, we can align the two. We can see here, as they are aligned, they do line up very, very closely. But let's take a few minutes to look a little deeper into each of the phases of the SDLC and the steps of the RMF and how they work together. So up first, we see here that we have the requirement analysis and design phase. These two phases line up very, very well with the prepare, categorize, and select steps of the RMF. So here, typically with the SDLC process, this is where we're gathering our stakeholder requirements, understanding what is the system's goals, objectives, or what does the software need to do that we're building, and then we come up with the design specifications for what we want to implement. Okay, what this means for the risk management framework, right? At that same time, this is where we'll develop our business impact analysis as well as our privacy impact assessment, just to understand what are the business goals, the objectives of the system. Are there any privacy concerns that we need to include within the system here? Once we have an understanding of those business goals for the systems, and we've done that impact analysis, we can use FIPS 199 to help us categorize the system. As we follow the guidance in FIPS 199, it'll tell us if we need to have a high expectation of security controls, moderate, or low. Once we've made that categorization determination and we know which category of security controls we need to implement, we can then go to 853B to determine what security controls from 853 align to the different baselines, so that if we picked moderate, for example, in 853B, we can find the moderate controls, security controls, that we need to implement within our system to make sure that we're meeting the objectives that were identified within the BIA and PIA to secure the system and operate it effectively. So once we have that baseline set of controls, this is where the information system security engineer and the information system security officer will work with your design team and software engineers or system engineers to help ensure that security is built into the system, right? So how are we going to, now that we know which security controls are applicable to our system, but how are we going to make sure that they're all implemented? And then, of course, as we're going through this design phase, this is where the ISSO will begin to develop the system security plan and to describe the intended approach for how each of the security controls will be implemented. Then here in the next phase, the implementation phase of the SDLC, nicely aligns to the implement step of the RMF. So here, this is where we're identifying the system components that we need to be developed, networking considerations, the configurations to make sure that the system will work effectively. And this is where we can start developing code, even if it's integration code. This is where we start putting the system together. And from the RMF standpoint, right, this is where we track that implementation and say, okay, for each of the security controls that we previously selected, right, how are they being implemented? Are they being implemented the way they designed? Do we have to make any tweaks? And also during this time, this is where we'll start developing the full accreditation package. So the SSP, again, as we're checking off the security controls and making sure that they're implemented, it will identify other resources that are going to be needed available to help maintain the system securely, such as the list that you see here on the screen. And additionally, right, this is also where we'll start writing policies and procedures to make sure that the security controls are properly implemented and maintained over time, so that we can have that full accreditation package ready to go, so that we can operate the system securely once we're done implementing all the security controls. And of course, throughout this phase, the ISSE, or Information System Security Engineer, remains available to the development team to help answer questions on approaches for implementing the security controls to make sure that they're effective. Next, we have the testing phase of the SDLC. The testing phase aligns to the assess phase of the risk management framework. So typically within your SDLC, this is where we're doing quality assurance checks, tests. We're also doing user acceptance testing, integration testing, just making sure that the system's going to work as intended or as expected, and we're meeting those requirements that we initially called out in the requirement analysis phase of the SDLC. In the assess step, we're going to also, in addition to the quality assurance and user acceptance testing, we want to make sure that we do a security control assessment of the security controls on the system. So to do that, the security control assessors will use 853A to identify the approach to take to ensure that each of the controls from 853 are properly implemented. So the security control assessors will develop a security assessment plan describing how they're going to evaluate each of the applicable controls for the system. One big difference here from common testing is that it does include management and operational as well as technical testing. So that we are going to also test the policies in that accreditation package that was previously developed to make sure that they are effective and that we do have procedures that are going to be followed to make sure that the system is maintained securely. So as the security control assessment is conducted, the security control assessors will evaluate each control to determine if the control is met, not met, or partially met. For anything that is either not met or partially met, the security control assessors will ensure that those security controls are added to the plan of action and milestone so that we can address them, right? What are we going to do to fix them so that we can get them to that met state? And then also the security control assessors will develop a security assessment report to describe their approach for testing and any of the findings and how the security controls were evaluated during the security control assessment. And then of course, as we find things, right, the information system security engineers and security officers, ASOs, will work together to close and address all of those items that we've put on the POA&M. The final phase of the SDLC is the evolution phase. The evolution phase aligns with the authorize and monitor steps of the RMF. So here we can see this is where the software is typically deployed. We're transitioning it over to the operations team so that they can operate it and put it into use. And we're going to monitor customer feedback and evolve the system as new requirements are identified or enhancements are requested. So what this means from the RMF standpoint, this is where we take that accreditation package, including the system security plan, security assessment report, and plan of action and milestone, and conduct a risk assessment. So let's determine, how well the controls are met. Are we meeting the security expectations required by the system as identified in the BIA and PIA when we started the approach, and we'll present that risk assessment to the authorizing official. And the AO at that point will make a determination of whether or not the authority to operate can be granted as required in our contract, as we previously stated. If the ATO is granted, the ISO will continue to work with the team as the system is operated to maintain the SSP as updates are required as new security capabilities are implemented or adjusted to meet changes in technology or the system's design. At the same time, we'll implement our continuous monitoring plan so that we're continually assessing the security controls to make sure that they remain effective and within the risk tolerance levels set by the authorizing official. And then, of course, we'll continually do that security control assessment, evaluating those security controls. So that was just a quick walkthrough of how the standard SDLC aligns to the steps within the risk management framework. And as you can see, they align very closely. And if implemented together, we gain a lot of efficiencies and can make sure that security is built into our system. Again, my name is Tom Conkle. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out at the email address there, or we also have additional resources available on the Optic website, as you can see here, including the videos that we talked about that support this one, as well as some templates to help you get started. And then we have some industry resources specifically from NIST that will help us describe the approach and give a lot more detail of the topics that we covered today. Okay, thank you.